Wine Fringe. All right, welcome back to Wine Fringe. I'm Jake Blottinger.
I'm Jill Smedley.
And we are here with Jenny McLeod, owner of Chrysalis Vineyards and intergalactic queen of Norton.
Which is what this episode happens to be about.
Right. So we're finally doing it. We're finally going to talk about Norton.
We've talked about it forever.
We've talked about it a lot. Norton is our day job, so we try not to talk about Norton. But we've been asked and begged, and there are other podcasts about Norton, but we're ground zero for Norton, and we're gonna do an episode with you, Jenny. Finally.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thank you for talking with me, and we're talking about Norton. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about.
I think it's your topic. So I know the story. Jill knows the story because she markets the story. But what's the story?
There's a little bit of as time and centuries have passed, decades and decades have passed. There's some interpretations that, or because of a lack of information, there's sort of an assumptions or there's filling in the holes in the history. But basically, there's a fellow who had married into the Ambler family in Virginia. They were friends with the Marshalls, like Chief Justice, Marshall, and they were the gentry class. And Catherine Bush Norton, she married John Norton, and he passed away in 1799. And Catherine Bush Norton married Colonel John Ambler, and Daniel, as a child, went into the Ambler family. Interestingly, that's why when looking for portraits of Daniel Norton, the portrait that we have and that we hang in our tasting room, and I have a copy in the house, is from the Ambler family collection of portraits. Oh. And so, if you're looking for something Norton. So anyway, Daniel Norborn Norton, heads off to Philadelphia, where he is trained as a medical doctor, a physician. And he moves back to Richmond. There's a little street called Norton Street. It's like 2 blocks long.
Yeah, that's cool.
Cool. Yeah, it's really cool. It's named after Dan Norton, and that's where he had Magnolia Farm.
Okay.
And right now it's still in downtown Richmond, but at the time it was sort of suburban Richmond because it's, I don't know, mile away or something from the governor's mansion,
Yeah, and it's right next to the sports complex.
Yeah, Virginia Community University sports.
Right across the street, basically.
And the old maps of it show railroad tracks and stuff going. It's really fascinating history. But anyway, he didn't really like doctoring too much, and he was much, much more interested in playing with plants and hybridizing. This was a period of time when the country didn't particularly rely on the experts. There were a lot of lay people, intelligent general folks that were interested in the sciences, and in this case it was to create hybrids to beautify the new country. And that's where a lot of the hybrids that we still grow today, like Bartlett pears and a number of different flowers and tree species and fruit, and a lot of the vegetables that have these names were created back in the early 1800s. So he began growing grapes and hybridizing grapes. And we're not exactly sure what Norton is. It is most likely, it's classified as a native species, Vitis aestivalis or estivalis. It's the Latin term would be pronounced aestivalis. And Daniel Norton said it was a cross between Vitis aestivalis and Miller's Burgundy. And Miller's Burgundy, it was the common name for Pinot Meunier. And the reason it was called Miller's Burgundy is that if you look at that grape, and I finally have seen it grow, and it looks as if you have dusted the young shoots with flour because they're white. It's like Albarino. You know how the growing tips are so white? That's the same thing. That kind of makes sense because if you've ever been around Pinot Noir and smelled it fermenting, it's not unlike Norton. There definitely is a Pinot kind of character to Norton because Norton has a lot of the chemical that makes the grapey aroma, and so does Pinot Noir, has a lot of methyl anthranilate. So there's some connection there. So there's definitely vinifera in it.
Right.
And there's definitely native Vitis aestivalis.
So that makes Norton a hybrid.
That is correct.
Okay, so Jill and I have talked about this. We've talked about this with you. And so since we've got a podcast and a platform now, we can settle the score. I think that you're the person that needs to decide, is it a native or is it a hybrid?
Personally, I like the moniker of being a native because it, hybrid just sort of seems like, oh, you mean like Vidal? Oh, you mean like Chamberson? Yeah. So, but to be technically accurate, it isn't exactly Vitis aestivalis. So if it's not Vitis aestivalis and it's not Pinot Meunier it's a hybrid.
It's a hybrid. So would it be incorrect to say a native hybrid?
Well, there could be some other native. Again, we don't really quite know what happened. Whether it was in a sort of natural experimental error that he thought maybe he was crossing it with this, but it wound up being crossed with some pollen from another native. Who knows? We really don't know. He also had commented that it was this bland grape,
right?
Which is from Colonel Bland. The grape wasn't bland, I don't suppose. I don't know. Right? we don't know because it's extinct. So that has been a problem in trying to do a genetic family history of what the heck the Norton grapevine is.
Right. So, okay, well, before we dive into that, because I know that's something that we should talk about, Thomas Jefferson was involved as well, right?
Not exactly. Thomas Jefferson, he passed away in 1826 or 1825, 1826 on July 4th. Yeah, the same day that John Adams died. That was pretty weird. I had done some research and had contacted Princeton University was doing Thomas Jefferson papers. They were transcribing all of his letters, which he had that little mechanism where he could copy letters. It was pretty cool, dude. And I contacted them, and the gal who was in charge of the program said, geez, no, there's no record of Daniel Norton corresponding with Thomas Jefferson. And that was at the same time, right? So if Jefferson was living in Monticello up until in the early 1820s, stone's throw away practically over in Richmond, Daniel Norton. And then she said, well, did you check the garden book? What? What's that?
Yeah.
He goes, oh yeah, he kept an incredibly complete record of all of the plants that had been received at Monticello and where they were planted and stuff. And then I contacted Monticello and they confirmed, oh yeah, there were cuttings received from Dr. D. Norton sent to Monticello, but they were not sent to Thomas Jefferson. They were sent to Thomas Jefferson Randolph, Jefferson's grandson, who was running Monticello in Jefferson's senior years. So yes, so in a way, Norton grapevines made it to Monticello, but I don't know what happened after that.
That's so cool.
I always thought that Jefferson kind of
was advocating.
He was trying to find a grape that we could grow in America that would make non-foxy wine, and that he got into cahoots with Dr. Norton.
No, that's just not true. And the thing is I think that Norton, Daniel Norton, so much time had passed by with Thomas Jefferson trying to grow vinifera grapes
Right.
and failing, that was one of the reasons that Norton was busied himself in propagating hybrids and trying to find a grape. There were so many grape varieties in America. You know, Leif Erikson called it Vineland. That's what he called. The guy who really discovered North America called it Vineland.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so I think that the failures that had been experienced with Jefferson in trying to grow the European grape is one of the impetuses that led Norton to, wait a minute, we have so many grapes going around. Let's see if we can't do something with a native grape and produce a high quality red table wine.
Right. Okay. Well,
And
that makes
that's,
more
I
sense.
think, voila, it's Norton. That's what happened.
All right. So, okay, so we've got the grape now. It's in Virginia. It's growing, and it's starting to make wine. We're making wine in Virginia, and it's pretty okay wine,
Yeah, so...
at least as far as we know.
yeah, as a matter of fact, it was really, really appreciated. There's an important character in this whole story who is the engine behind the propagation and promulgation of Norton into outside of Virginia, into Missouri, Illinois, Arkansas. And his name was William Prince Jr.
Right.
And his father had, or his grandfather, I think it was his father, had started the William Prince Botanical Gardens, Linnaeus Botanical Gardens in Flushing, New York, which is on Long Island, actually.
Right.
And he had written, and I had read a section out of one of it. He wrote these, he had these catalogs, and he was the one who did the Bartlett pear.
Yes.
He created all sorts of hybrids for fruit. He was particularly interested in fruit trees and plants that gave you food. And he became friends with Norton. When Norton's wife died in childbirth, it crushed Daniel Norton. He wound up visiting William Prince in Flushing, New York. But to back up a little tiny bit, there was enough information. Norton must have sent cuttings up to Flushing to Prince, because in 1821 he wrote a accolade and a recommendation for Americans that we owe Dr. Daniel Norton a great debt of gratitude for him bringing on this new grape.
Oh.
And I'm like, no shit. So in 1821, and it became available commercially in 1830 in the Prince Nursery catalog that he mailed out to everybody.
Right.
And that's how it then it got taken out to Missouri, because there was a big influx of German immigrants in the mid-1800s. And of course they came through New York Harbor, and they took they had heard about the Prince Nursery of world renown, and they took plants out to Missouri and Illinois, and that's how it got out that way.
Okay, and then Prohibition happens. Wait. Before we jump into Prohibition,
Yeah.
there's a very important world event that happens with Norton.
It developed
There's
a little bit of
a huge
reputation.
amount of information along that pathway. Norton became a world-renowned wine.
Right, so we were in 1830, and now we're in 1873, right?
Well, yeah, I guess along the way, I don't know all of the awards and all of the kinds of medals and ribbons and stuff that it had received, but we know that the World's Fair of 1873, which was held in Vienna, Austria, at the Vienna Universal Exhibition, reportedly a Norton wine was acclaimed the best red wine of all nations.
Right.
And I do know that prior to that World's Fair, to back up a little bit, phylloxera, with all of the grape varieties, as soon as the 1800s kind of started rolling around, and Norton and then T.V. Munson and all the varieties that he was doing, bunches and bunches of grapes got sent off to Europe, into the south of
Right.
France particularly. And unknown at that time, in the roots was a tiny, tiny little vine louse called phylloxera.
Right.
And the European grape species, Vitis is the genus, right? So Vitis aestivalis, vine, or Vitis vinifera, and that's a European grape. They had not developed and evolved with this bug. So they became very susceptible. The vine louse eats the roots, and the European grapes have a reaction. I don't know if it's like a histamine or some sort of alert, and they form these little nodules, and it strangles the vine. And so by the time that the vines were dying, they just sort of wither and die, and then they'd investigate the vine and they go, what the heck's going on with this vine? The problem was for many, many years that by the time they investigated the vine, the bugs were gone because the vine was dead.
Yeah.
They weren't there anymore. So there was a guy, I'm going somewhere with this story, Jules Émile Planchon
Right.
is a professor at the University of Montpellier in France. He discovers that it's a bug that has been eating the roots. And he publicly and repeatedly recommended that it be Norton to replant the Languedoc after all the vines had been decimated in the southwest of France. Isn't that cool?
That is
Really cool.
that
And but
explains
it being French and all, like, no, we're not going to have an American vine in our soils and all. So they figured out how to graft the European grapevine tops onto the root stock of a. In fact, throughout the world, almost everywhere, with very few exceptions, there's parts of Chile because of the Andes Mountain that the phylloxera never made it there.
Right.
But all throughout Europe, Australia, the U.S., South Africa, the Far East, wherever they're growing European grapes, they're all grafted onto American
there's
rootstock.
almost no pure vinifera anymore. I mean, there are a few places, but
Right, whole vinifera,
Yeah.
right, with their
Own rooted, right.
their own rooted, right, and that's another thing that's so cool about Norton because it's completely phylloxera resistant, and I'm not sure what the actual mechanism is. I think that the bugs eat the Norton roots. It just grows more roots.
It just grows more roots.
It doesn't
Yeah.
have that same reaction, and so. That happened before 1873.
Right.
So now we're talking about people that are knowing, and a lot of the French country growers, they were totally into these American varieties. There was like Cunningham,
Right.
Norton, Dime. There's
Something
a whole,
new and
whole
different, yeah.
bunches of them, and they still, to this day, clandestinely grow these American grapes because they're not supposed to be growing them.
It's kind of a little rebellion going on.
Yeah, so
I
it's
love
pretty
that.
pretty
it's the
cool.
French thing.
So, okay, so we've got
So we're moving past
Yeah,
that. 1891, Paris gold medal. A couple things happened that definitely impacted Norton. The first thing that impacted Norton was the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. And now you had access to California.
Yeah.
And California is like grows anything, right? Our joke with Californians is, yeah, but we have weather.
that is very true. We've talked about
We
that
did
too.
in the last episode.
So you could, ship your grapes back.
Right.
And, they didn't have refrigeration or anything particularly at that point, but maybe the way ice boxes, the reason they call it an ice box is that you used to put big chunks of ice in your
Right.
ice box. And that's what kept everything cold.
Yeah.
So that was one thing. And then Prohibition just was the, final straw that broke the camel's back and the final nail that hit the coffin of Norton.
Right. So we've got Prohibition.
Almost.
Almost.
So Prohibition comes in, it wipes out grapes in America, with wine in America. We've talked about this. And then you've got all of these German immigrants going to Missouri, settling down. They've passed through New York. They've got the grapes. they've got Norton and other fruiting things, and they're planting them in Missouri, and they're just moving on with their life. Prohibition happens, and I believe that they started ripping out, hatchet and barrels and chopping them all down.
Carrie Nation.
Yeah, Carrie Nations, thank you.
And her anti-saloon league.
Yeah.
She was nuts.
Yeah, that's a word for it.
I mean, she literally ran around with hatchets and was cut on barrels, and they burned the fermentation records, and God forbid that this abomination ever happens again. Blah 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 blah.
I guess she never found a wine she liked.
Never found a wine she liked. So, but the German immigrants are keeping the Norton alive in the woods behind their house, essentially, right? So it was just growing wildly.
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
But what kept Norton alive out in the open and through proper maintenance and care was the Catholic Church. A lot of these Germans were immigrants. My family on my mom's side came into Missouri in the mid-1800s.
Right.
Gosh, I have a cool little story, just real quick.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Story.
Go for it.
So one of my kids, Dustin, was out doing architectural college training at University of Boulder, and I went to pick him up, and his younger brother, another one of my sons, Kevin, had gone out and was living with him. So we're tooling back across the country, and I thought, I think I want to stop in Westphalia, Missouri, because my mom would say throughout all of our childhood that, oh yeah, the family's from Westphalia. Well, my mom was born in Des Moines, Iowa, and I thought that was always in Iowa somewhere. Mm-hmm. And we had done a Norton competition, National Norton Conference and competition in St. Louis, Missouri. And the judges were stingy. They only gave 6 gold medals away to about, 70 or 80 wines submitted. And we took 2 of the 6.
Wow.
One of the other gold medals was Westphalia Vineyards. And I had made the point of calling all of the gold medal winners to congratulate them. I had tasted their wines, just well done. And I told them the story. I said, my mom says we're from Westphalia, but she was from Iowa. He goes, well, what's her name? Bode, B-O-D-E. Oh, you mean like the Bodie Hotel and the Bodie this and the Bodie
No
that?
way.
In this little town of Westphalia. Turns out his sister and his brother-in-law live in the house that my great-great-grandfather built as a hotel, the Bodie Hotel. And so we hit, and he's Terry Neuner from Westphalia Vineyards. And I got a chance to go into the house that my great-great-grandfather, I don't know how many, had built.
No way.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
All because of Norton.
all because of Norton.
So, okay, well, all right, so I think that covers the history of Norton, right?
Pretty much now we're in Prohibition. One
Okay.
thing that's important to realize that when Prohibition started, nobody had the concept that it would be repealed.
Right.
So all the grapes are pulled out of the ground. Norton died out, at least commercially, in Virginia.
Right.
And being kept alive in Missouri, but particularly by record, the Catholic Church. It wasn't necessarily growing all over from the other growers because there were plenty of growers here. So, and the reason, unless anticipating another question of like what happened, why didn't it
Right.
recover after at the end of Prohibition? You're like, quick, get the list out. Norton has a couple characteristics that were not advantageous for the quick reestablishment of a vineyard. Number one, it's tough to propagate from cuttings.
Right.
It does not develop adventitious rooting easily. We are a commercial nursery, and we figured it out, but it took us some years, and we still generally don't get more than about 75 or 80%
I'd say
take.
70% is what I would
Yeah.
confidently say.
And the other thing that is perhaps even more significant is it really does take about an extra year. Norton is a slower starter to get going to produce fruit. So you can imagine at the end of Prohibition, quick, Jake, get the list out.
We need wine now.
Yeah, Norton, tough to start, slow to grow. Next.
Well, I mean, it's funny because I often forget about that. I'm like, okay, we've got Norton vines, cool. And then I look at our 40 acres of Norton and I'm like, Jesus Christ, it's almost harvest time. It's growing so fast. It's out-competing everything growing, and it's always growing. It grows like a weed.
And it
So-
produces like crazy.
Produces like crazy too. But before we start talking about the wine and the vineyard stuff and the marketing behind some of it,
But think about, it doesn't start fast. And if you go into the vine, and our oldest Norton planting is in its 27th leaf this year. And you look at the trunks, and they look like a vinifera that's maybe in its 5th year.
yeah.
They're, I guess, I don't know, just longer developing.
But it's such a vigorous vine.
It's
It's incredibly vigorous.
It is incredibly vigorous in this climate, because of the humidity, and one of the reasons why we want to have a split canopy to support its natural tendency to be vigorous.
Right.
But contrary, Jill, it's not a huge producer.
It's not. People talk about it being like a war horse in the vineyard.
No, it's bulletproof in the vineyard. It is the most disease bunch grape in the world. I've not found one more. I have Jake is laughing because I used to say the most disease resistant grape, and coming up from the Carolinas and Georgia, he had to correct me saying bunch grape, because muscadine and the bullet grapes, they're really disease resistant as well. But it's on the list. If you look at all the hybrids, all the vinifera, just throw the vinifera out because they're
frail.
They're frail. It's always at the top of the list.
I would say that Norton gets diseases. We see black rot on it from time to time.
I never saw black rot on clusters.
Yeah?
I never did.
We never see it on the clusters. We see it on the leaves.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay.
But what
yeah,
doesn't
but
get black rot?
I'm worried. I'm talking about the clusters.
No,
and it'll get zonate leaf spot, and it'll get downy a little bit. But it has this incredible. There's a couple reasons. I don't know how in the weeds you want to get with this.
No.
But a vine releases the chemical that's in wine that is the good chemical for your heart, resveratrol. Resveratrol. Resveratrol is released in the vine as an antifungal, antibacterial constituent. And it has super high levels of resveratrol, hence its disease resistance. It also has a real tricky little tricky trick. It has this really interesting trick of whenever it gets a spot of fungus on a leaf, it'll create a ring of dead tissue, of necrotic tissue around the spot of fungus, and the fungus can't spread.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
cool?
no kidding, that's like really cool. And so, super disease resistant, not a horrible producer, but our average yields at Crystal's Vineyards are probably average yields a little under 3 tons per acre, I'd say. And we've had as high as 3.5 and getting close to 4 maybe on a couple of small, areas.
There were a couple of blocks that pushed 4.
Yeah,
back
but
in
not,
18.
it's not, some people have claimed, and I'm not sure this is true, Dennis Horton, who's a dear friend, God rest his soul, he passed away some years ago, once boasted that he got 8 tons an acre on his Norton, but I don't see how the hell that happened. But
I don't know.
I don't want to call him a liar and all, but and his wife Sharon was a consummate grape grower and spent all of her time in the vineyard, and so maybe he did. I don't know.
Well, that actually is a good segue for my next question, because we're out of prohibition. We don't really want to grow Norton because it's tough to start. And then how does it get back to Virginia? I think that's a cool story.
Yeah.
And then it leads into your background too. So can you tell that?
Well, I think it is a fascinating story. Stonehill Winery,
Right.
in the late 1800s, was one of the largest wineries in the world.
Right.
They produced like over 1 million gallons of wine,
Yeah.
like a huge amount of wine. And I guess, 1890s and all, we were sucking down a lot of wine.
Probably cheaper back then.
And Dennis Horton happened to have been born in Herman, Missouri, where Stonehill Winery
Right.
is. And Dennis was an experimenter. Dennis brought into Virginia Viognier. He also experimented with a large number of other unusual grape varieties like our Cacciatelli, and he brought Norton. He took cuttings from Stonehill Winery, who apparently Jim Held had found or had visited a mother vine that had been a couple hundred years old, 150, whatever, on a yard that had been part of the Catholic Church, and took cuttings and propagated and restored the
Interesting.
vine. I don't know if it was, I'm not quite sure it was Jim Held, but somebody did.
Right.
Right after Prohibition. And so Missouri had been growing Norton, and a number of different wineries were growing Norton for sure before Dennis did in the late 1980s.
In Virginia?
In Virginia. So I think the first vintage of Norton as a varietally labeled Norton, I think, was the 1992 Horton Norton.
Right.
I do know that Doug Flemmer had grown Norton prior, but he never released it as a individual grape variety, but Dennis did. And then I came up to Virginia when I sold Landmark Research, and I was attending the Eastern section of the ASEV, American Society of Enology and Viticulture. The Eastern section meeting was in Charlottesville, and the theme that year was alternative grape varieties. So I tasted Viognier in the morning session. I thought, geez, that's really, really good white wine. And I saw Dennis and Alan Kinney up on the dais talking about Norton, and Alan was talking about the advantages of irrigation. And so at the lunch break, I just glommed onto Dennis, just puppy dog right with. I sat down right next to him. Nobody even. I wasn't going to let anybody get in.
So
and I
brazen.
and I became good friends with Dennis, and we must have talked literally a couple times a week for a year. He was super generous with his time and support, and hence that's why I like having a policy to help other growers that are trying to get started and kind of pass along that ethic of help
Yeah, it's
and
one of my favorite
camaraderie
things.
in the industry. We do that. You do that a lot too.
We do, and I like the encouragement that we have here, and that's part of the foundation for the Norton Network that we're all working on together. It's that supporting and also the marketing and representing Norton and why it's important. And we don't need to gush about all the cool stuff that we do all the time, but so you've got Horton doing Norton, you meet Dennis, you start growing Norton, and then Alan Kenny's working with you to show you how to make world-class Viognier, and he helps you discover, he helps America basically discover Albarino with you on a trip to Spain. And we'll do a whole episode about those cool varieties too, because I think that's a story that you definitely need to tell. If you don't know, Jenny and Alan Kenny brought Albarino to America, and she has the records to prove it.
Yeah, but you brought it back in a fun way.
Oh, yeah, well, we'll deny that, but I suppose the statute of limitations has passed now.
By the way, I've told this story to like our book club at Chrysalis and all that stuff. So they
Yes,
all
we
know.
brought some cuttings in. Well, here, we'll just get it out in the open.
It came back as aromatic barbecue sticks.
Yes, they did.
Through customs.
So I really want to talk about that at some point.
Yeah, we should.
I think it's a great story, and Alan Kenny's a cool person. But you're starting Chrysalis Vineyards, you're planting this, what I would refer to as a fringe variety, not just obscure, but fringe at the time. So you're in the early 2000s.
Did you
Late 90s.
Late 90s, okay.
Did you get kickback from people saying like, why would you choose Norton over any other varietal? Because I know industry-wide there's a negative feeling towards Norton like today. I can't imagine being a conquistador during like the start of really bringing Norton back to Virginia and the perceptions you were dealing with then.
I did. Actually, interestingly, in 1999, I hosted a field session of the Virginia Vineyards Association. And I got absolutely asked that question because we had just finished planting, we had the Fair Cervidou, we had Tempranillo, Graziano, big planting of Norton. The only international variety that we had planted was Chardonnay in the front field originally. Everything else was sort of out there. And somebody had asked me, geez, Jenny, don't you worry about being able to market these unusual grape varieties? And I told them, and I remember what I said. I said, there's a couple ways that you can approach the market. You can follow the market, wherever that might lead you, but you may also lead the market.
And be the outlier.
And that's where I decided that, at the time it's taken a lot of time, and we probably could have moved faster, but I thought the idea of growing a great Native American grape that it had been acclaimed and truly appreciated internationally was a really cool program. I thought the idea of restoring a native, super disease-resistant grape that wanted to grow here, that we didn't have to coax it or cajole it to grow, and you mentioned it, and it's true in a way. If it's not in the vineyard, the damn thing's a weed. It's like, right. Get it.
It runs the vineyard.
Spread.
But on that topic, you've now made it your mission to see Norton become world-renowned.
That was a mission early on. So our mission, if you ever look on the back of our business cards, it says...
And it's on our website, too.
Yeah. To proudly restore Virginia wines to world renown and to celebrate the homecoming of Norton, the real American grape.
Right. That's a trademark registered.
Yeah, and that's a registered trademark, the real American grape.
Of course, got to cross all our bases, Jenny.
You're leading the charge in Virginia with this obscure variety, a lot of obscure varieties at the time, and you've got Alan Kinney, you have all these fantastic winemakers, but you're trying to sell something that is very difficult for consumers to understand at that time. But what about producing the Norton wine? What is, I could talk about this, as I do talk about this, is my day job, but I think I've learned everything, and I will say this, everything I've learned about making Norton wine, whether I'm good at it or bad at it, is irrelevant. I learned everything from Chrysalis Vineyards. I've never touched it. I never had it before I came here.
Wow, that was quite the leap from muscadine
to
Norton.
real wine. But I learned it all from Chrysalis, and I have all the winemaker's notes and stuff. But the most knowledge I gain from it comes from conversations and our tastings every week, and things like that. But I don't want to pretend like I'm the expert. If you weren't here, maybe I would be. But let's talk about
Well,
Norton
you're certainly
wine.
an expert. I mean, there's certainly your interaction with it on a day-to-day basis, year after year and vintage after vintage, surpasses my direct experience with it. The advantage that I have is that I was sort of blazing trails, and I was really remembering what the hell was significant.
Right.
And even early on, when I engaged Alan as a consultant, I go, yeah, I'm going to grow grapes. I'm like, well, I was thinking, geez, I don't want to retire. I was 40 years old, 41 years old. And I'm like, no, that's 40. And I'm like, shit, when you retire, don't you go downhill really fast? I was thinking that.
That's how it goes, isn't it?
I don't know, but I'm like, all right, what's next? So I thought, hey, let's grow grapes. And so Alan asked me, well, what do you like to drink? And I was kind of taken aback. I'm like, well,
what's it matter what I like to
doesn't that
drink?
have to do with where we are? I was like, and he goes, yeah, but do you really want to grow something you don't want to drink? I'm like, shit, no. So that makes sense. And so I told him, I said, well, I collect classified growth Bordeaux's. I really like Bordeaux's. If I can get my hands on good Burgundy, that too, but it's so hard to get good Burgundies because you don't know. You buy something, it can be expensive and not very good. And I said, but for everyday drinking that is affordable, I really love the fruit-forward Spanish Reds from Penedez, and in particular, Torres Coronas. interestingly, as time has passed on, the guy who turned me on to Torres Coronas has wound up becoming a pretty important wine person. Chip Cassidy from Miami, foremost Sunset Liquors on Galloway and I think it was Bird Road in Galloway out west in Miami. I went into the store and he was really helpful, and I bought a lot of, God knows how many cases of Torres Coronas. But anyway, I digress. So we went to Spain. That's what got us to Spain.
Right.
Was the fact that I like Spanish. And I had never heard of Albarino, as a matter of fact. But I think one of the reasons at that time, right, and it was Alan, you're right, who introduced me. So we really owe Alan. I did it. I paid for it.
Of course, somebody had to.
But he introduced it to me, so that was excellent. But anyway, I think it's one of the reasons I really fell in love with Norton, because Norton has that wonderful fruit-forward character.
It's very fruit-forward.
One of the problems was, back onto your question, in knowledge about Norton, one of the first things that I recognized is that, and this still can be a problem today with a lot of Nortons, is it's incredibly densely colored, great aromatics. You're just expecting to have this fruit bomb in your mouth, and you get it in your mouth, and many of them have this sort of thinness or hollowness in the mid-palate. It belies the aromatics, the color, and you go, and it can leave a bit of a disjointed consideration about Norton, a little bit of a disappointment when you get it on the palate.
Right.
And so because it had this sort of hole in the mid-palate, which partly can be because its tannin structure is different than Vitis vinifera, Alan, that's the reason we grow Nebbiolo, Petit Verdot, and Tannat, because those are three particularly tannic varieties. And we had originally planted those to be the mid-palate lifter blender into our Norton. And to this day, in our Loxley Reserve, and the wine that we're drinking right now, has Petit Verdot and Tannat.
Right.
Well, we should pause there and talk about the wine we're drinking right now.
So this isn't available on the shelf. This is something that Jenny and I were working on last Thursday.
Yep.
We did a trial of Loxley Reserve 2023, which is our flagship red here at Chrysalis Vineyards. And it's 80% Norton, and then 15% Tannat and 5% Petit Verdot, which ironically, I was looking at some old tasting notes, and the 2013 Loxley Reserve was the same blend.
Oh, is that right?
Isn't that crazy?
Well, each year we just sort of,
Depends on what comes in.
assess each element and, play around with some trials until we get it just right.
And we've been working on this wine off and on, and that's something like Jenny and I meet every Tuesday and Thursday, and we taste wines, and we shoot the shit and eat crackers and cheese and snacks and talk about business and work, but we taste a lot of wine, and that's my favorite part of the job.
I think that's something really unique to you guys, honestly, because when I came here, you're like, do you want to come to a blending session? I'm like, what is that? Don't you just do it in the cellar and then you're just like, here's the finished product? No, you actually come in, you say, here are my 3 recommendations or my 4, and Jenny reviews them all, and it's a collaborative discussion, and I love sitting.
And we don't do it in the cellar; we do it in my kitchen.
You do it in your kitchen, and I love that too, because you said something really impactful to me, is that you want to taste wine where your consumers are going to have it at home.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I always forget about that until someone.
Yeah,
says
well,
that.
the saving is I want to taste and assess wines where I'm drinking them.
Yeah,
I don't want where all of the aromas and the sensory inputs are all flatline based to me.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be in the cellar and have the smell of some fuel from the boiler, or maybe there's been some sulfur additions or something, and I'm really I don't want to be in an environment where the aromatics and things are
different
variable.
Right.
I want something that's stable.
Because a lot of people will mention, and I've seen this on other wineries' pages, not specifically ours, on their review. It's like, well, I loved this wine when I had it in the winery, but then I got home and it tasted completely different. And I had heard that at other wineries I had worked at. And here, I don't notice that same commentary. And I think a lot of that comes from the intentional like tasting here and knowing what it tastes like outside of
It
the
probably
winery.
I
or
would like to
cellar.
think so, but it's probably mostly because
Well, just-
they were drunk.
It's marketing, Jenny.
So we're tasting the 2023 Loxley Reserve. We've been working on this.
Don't tell them the secret.
Jenny and I have been working on this since the beginning of 2024. It'll go into bottle in a few weeks. It's 30% French oak, and then the 80% Norton is actually a blend of different Norton styles. And you were starting to allude to this, and this is a very delicious wine. I think we've done a great job with it. We make 9 different Norton wines. And everybody listening right now is going, you do what?
Yeah.
And a lot of people in the industry go, oh my God, you guys are crazy. But we make 9 different SKUs of Norton, but we have 6 different styles of Norton. And
This is an incredibly versatile grape.
yeah,
I mean, we can make a wine that is a juicy, fruity, deeply colored rosé, which is our Butterfly Rouge. Easiest wine in the world practically to make.
It
It's
is.
just whole cluster press it. It's already dark.
wait, hold on. Before you move on to the topic, let's settle this. This is our fringe fact for the day.
Ooh.
I know the answer, but I want Jenny to.
I love
you
the
have to
crazy
decide
eye that's
the answer.
happening right now.
Is Norton, let's bring this to Wikipedia
Is
too.
Norton-
Is Norton a Teinturier grape?
Absolutely not.
There you heard it.
Thank
it's true.
goodness.
Okay,
In
so
I have to
fact,
correct
I
someone.
was the one, and also with the Tannat grape, that corrected on Wikipedia, and my receipts were, I have the world's largest planting of this grape. I know what the hell it looks like.
40 acres.
Yeah, and I also grow Tannat. Neither of those grapes are Teinturier grapes.
Right.
They have green flesh. The color does not come from the juice. It comes from the intensity of the color in the skins. The
Right.
anthocyanin is in the skins. So it's not a Teinturier grape.
You know,
Like Alicante Boucher, some of the Alicante grapes that are used in France to deepen the color of grapes that don't have sufficient color naturally.
Right.
Color's not our issue in our cooler climate. We get like really deeply colored and aromatic grapes.
there's so much misunderstanding of Norton in the industry still. And I actually had a friend reach out to me. We did that campaign on socials about, basically uncovering all of the falsehoods about Norton. Do you remember we did that at one point in time?
Yeah.
And then we talked about Teinturier grapes. And I actually had a friend reach out to me, and she said, you're wrong. It is a Teinturier. Sorry, I'm getting
A
tongue-
Teinturier. It's
Teinturier grape.
Teinturier. I'm not sure if that's pronounced
She's like,
properly.
you're wrong, it is. And I said, no, actually, it's not. Like, I had the winemaker cut one open and show me. It's actually incorrect.
All right, we're doing a video this harvest.
Yeah, we need to. You actually did one last harvest.
We're doing another one.
Okay.
You can take a skin and just go,
Yeah.
and whatever squirts out is totally green.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe with a little bit of red, but that's from squeezing the skin.
Yeah. So
But that was a tasting room manager who's supposed to be training the staff, saying, hey, like,
Who was, yeah, huh.
I'm not going to go into the who.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I won't
Unfortunate.
name drop.
But I want to talk about real quick the different styles. You were alluding to the versatility, and then we got segued.
We do side quest a lot.
We side quest a lot. So we've got whole cluster press Norton, super fruity, nice, delicious, dark rosé. What else, Jenny?
Well, here's the thing. We had a bad event in the vineyard that had a silver lining, a blessing in disguise. We had a killing frost in 2003, an early fall frost, and it took all the leaves on October 2nd, and the fruit was not ripe. We're like, holy smokes, what are we going to do? We wound up kind of having to chemically adjust the acid with some chalk, calcium carbonate, just a base that we could have knocked out some of the acid. It's a little more involved than that, but for expediency's sake, here's what happened. I realized that we were growing these tannic varieties to pump up the mid-palate. And I realized that when we were able to reduce the acid, it automatically brought up the mid-palate and the
Right.
weight and the richness and allure and viscousness of the wine. And I'm like, holy smokes. So that begat a program year after year after year of how do we now naturally try to reduce the malic acid in the Norton. I don't want to use chemicals. We had to, and it's not a big deal. It's just it's calcium, but it's still manipulative, and we didn't want to do that. That led to a real involved search of how do you deal with it in the vineyard. Keep it green. Let that fruit get exposed to the sun. Make sure it's super ripe. That's number one. Number two, get it into the cellar and try to remove some of the seeds that maybe have some of that acid, and consequently, we do a modified delistage to try to remove some of the seeds. We came across a suggestion by Mark Bunter, winemaker, in 2005. There's a process called carbonic maceration that will naturally reduce some of the malic acid through enzymatic action, and that is actually became the foundation of our Barrel Select Norton.
Right.
And so then we had Alan came back in 2010, Kinney, to make wine, and he had just been making Pinots over in Oregon, and he said, Jenny, I've been thinking about this. Norton is your flagship variety, but because it's so bulletproof in the vineyard, there's sort of a consideration that it's just bulletproof. You get it in the cellar and you're pumping it all over and throwing it in tanks and stuff and using must pumps. He goes, I think we should try being more delicate with this fruit, and let's ferment it in half-ton bins and punch it down with a pole and a base where you can gently push the skins and floating cap down into the juice and be very delicate. And that the intent being leave some of the harsher acids and stuff that you may squeeze out of the grape through rough handling and try to treat it delicately. That was a great advantage. Anyway, so we've moved along, and Jake, interestingly, and to his total credit, reviewed all of our records. He says, I want to see what you guys have done. How is it you got these golds, and how did you get that, blah, blah. What have you done that developed this reputation for quality wines? And scoured all of our records. And what he's come up with is this sort of distillation of all these little various elements and ways that we process Norton that we've experimented with over the years. And he's created a palette of different vinified styles of Norton that we can then bring together and blend the carbonic with the punch down. We have a lagar, a big tank like the Portuguese used to use, has a different character. It's a big tank that's punched down. We still do some tank fermentations with pump over. So now we have elements that Jake blends together to create the different styles of Nortons. And it's like we've almost moved out of the sort of tactical science-y kind of stuff and have moved closer into the artistry of crafting fine wines.
Whoa, I don't know
Wow,
if I'm an
high
artist.
praise.
I know, thank you, Jenny, but all of our listeners know at this point that I'm more into blends than I am single varieties, and
But you even do blends with single varieties.
Exactly. So the idea hit me. We would talk about all these awards and all this one time Alan Kinney did this or Mark did that, or so and so introduced this, and it's like, as a winemaker, you walk into a cellar and you want to reinvent the wheel and you want to take ownership of the wines, and that's kind of an ego-driven chefy thing. And everybody knows I hate chefs and egos. And to me, I came to Chrysalis Vineyards to make Chrysalis Vineyards wine. Right? So there is no ego for me. I just want to make the best Chrysalis Vineyards wines. And the only way to really do that was to figure out when all the best Chrysalis wines were made and then how they were made and try to replicate those styles. And it's involved into this like spice rack type thing. I mean, we have 2 entire rows of barrels. There's 60 barrels or so of just Norton wines in different styles. And, and every year we do an experiment. We try something different. This year I've got a really exciting experiment. I'm not going to tell anybody on the podcast yet. We'll wait. But yeah, so I'm not reinventing the wheel or doing anything different. I'm just doing what made Chrysalis Vineyards great with you and all the other previous winemakers. When they were successful, we're just doing that again.
I think you also pride yourself on a level of consistency too.
I don't want to embarrass you, Jake, but but that's an unusual mindset and frame of mind to be into. And I just want to publicly appreciate that, because we've all had a hand in the development of how do we deal with our wines at Chrysalis Vineyards, and to set aside the ego. It's not that you're without ego,
Well, I have a bit.
but just to set it to the side for a little bit and try to introduce the elements and use again I'll say it again, it's more of an artistic sort of palette that you've developed. That is your contribution to Chrysalis Vineyards, is this development of a palette of wine.
Well, I'm not going to cry, but
I am.
okay. Well, I've enjoyed working on this, and it's been a blast, and I've enjoyed it so much, and I appreciate all of the high praise. We do amazing things here at Chrysalis Vineyards, but and we're going to continue to do amazing things at Chrysalis Vineyards with Norton, and that kind of has led into Jill and I's other project that we work on, aside from the Wine Fringe and aside from Chrysalis Vineyards. Because of you in a manager's meeting a year ago, when we were talking about, we're trying to come up with new ideas, and we all walked away from the table with, we've got to fix this, and we've got to hire this, and we've got to, rent this piece of equipment. And I called you and I was like, Jenny, we should try to put together some kind of Norton thing.
Like holiday.
Yeah, and Jill and I were joking about a Norton Day.
Everything that we do starts as a joke, and then
Always.
it turns into a long-term project.
So Jill and I put together, with your support.
But we got to talk about how this came to be really quickly.
Okay, go for
it
it.
starts as a joke. We're like, we're going to have a holiday. And then we decide that's not going to have enough impact. Jenny wants to see Norton become world-renowned. If we just have a holiday, it's going to be like any other winery having an event. So we need more people involved. And you said get every winery in the state of Virginia, who has Norton. We got to do something with them. You didn't say what. You just said something. And it's like, there's this grant that the Virginia Wine Marketing Board has. And then it just snowballed into how can we push Jenny's mission to see Norton become world renowned? Well, we need to get awareness in our backyard. We have it from the production side. You've done a beautiful job, making all these producers, man, when we had their first Norton Network meeting, it seemed like everybody had gotten their vines from Chrysalis.
Yeah.
And that's the the standard.
That was part of the mission.
That was part of the mission. So you started at, for lack of better words, and I don't think there is better ones, ground level. Mm-hmm. And now we're at the point where it's like, let's get the general consumers, not just in our tasting rooms, but involved in these bigger events. And so we made a Norton wine tour, and we made the Norton Network.
And but the whole concept was, okay, Jenny's created this 27 years, whatever it is, mission of restoring Norton, but we got to go into the backyard. There are still consumers here in Virginia that have no idea about Norton.
I have an idea on this. Ambassadors of goodwill for Norton, no matter where they are. We're always looking for people to step up and help and do a little bit of something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do it.
Go talk Norton to your wine.
We have influencers who are getting to be a part of this too.
Yeah, we need. Is that it? Influencers.
Yeah,
I always call them ambassadors of goodwill.
Now they're called influencers, unfortunately.
Yeah. So we
I think ambassador sounds better than influencers. Because you feel like you're being influenced. You're influencing me.
It's so
that always had a
positive.
negative. But an ambassador is one who comes and represents something in a good sense.
And it says they have credentials.
It's okay.
To do so.
Influences is fine. Whatever the current term is, I'm okay.
Just drink more Norton wine. No, but we've put together the Norton Network, and it's an advocates and producers group with we've got Chrysalis involved, Barrel Oak,
Paradise
Springs,
Rappahannock Cellars,
Horton, Arterra. Nokesville,
Yeah.
Piedmont Meadows. We've got like 26, 27 wineries, and then we've got advocates.
And they're not always active at the same time,
No,
but
but we're starting this thing, and then last year we had a Norton Day, and everybody in the month of October had a Norton.
well, it was the
event.
Norton wine tour. We did it differently than like a regular wine tour experience.
Right.
This was everybody had events, everybody had promotions, and they all had a poster, videos. There was so much more to it than just your standard wine experience.
Yeah, and then that was the public facing side. The other, the technical side, the production side, and the marketing side of that was, bringing Jenny McLeod into the room, bringing John Delmar of Rappahannock and Jeremy over at Barrel Oak and
Shannon Horton,
Sharon Horton, bringing all the producers into a room and doing roundtables and discussing what we're doing and how, and it's really amazing. You can see the old guard of Virginia's Norton wines. They're just these very intricate, elegant Nortons, and then you have like the new younger producers that are making these softer, more approachable, drinkable right this second, but probably not necessarily going to age well. And now we're all having conversations about how to make better Norton wine and how to grow it and how to market it and how to create events around it. And we're seeing consumers respond to this. We got asked multiple times to do this Norton episode, and we were like, well, we probably shouldn't, but Jill and I could talk about Norton for days too. I mean, not just outside of work.
Well,
we
you guys do. You guys do a blog, a Fringe, right?
Yeah.
And so, there couldn't be, in my estimation, a better life experience. And you're a winemaker, and you market wines. I mean, if you were just somebody who happened to like wines, there's a gazillions of those. So, it just seems appropriate. And how are you not going to want to talk about something that you're passionate about?
Yeah, and I hate to be passionate about something all the time, like when I'm because it's my day job, and then I do it outside of work. And Jill and I lament about this all the time, but we're doing it because of your mission, and now we've got other producers here that are all kind of following this restore Norton back to greatness
We're
thing.
seeing the traction with the consumers now too.
And so this year for the tour, we're going to kick off the 2025 tour with the Norton Showcase on June 7th at Piedmont Meadows. And that's going to be, you're going to be there. We're doing a panel about the history of Norton, and consumers can talk to you, Todd Kleiman, John Delmar, Steve Monson. I don't think John's going to be able to attend.
John's not going to be there. He's
But
traveling.
you're going to be able to talk to the people behind
The curtain.
the bottle and the curtain. And I think that's probably the most important thing. And it seems like to me, and I'll call out the industry, the people working with Norton are very passionate about it, and they want to share it, and they want to do these events and engage with those consumers.
And this is their vehicle to do it.
And we're going to have food trucks and a tasting and vendors. And
12 wineries are going to
12
be
wineries.
there. Yep.
And then after the showcase, we have miniature festivals throughout the
summer. So that's going to take place from July through September. So we have, Nokesville is going to be a host site, Castanel. We have Chateau Maryland. There's a few others.
We'll be there.
Yeah, and of course, Chrysalis will be represented on site at a couple different those events. But we have, I believe, 5. I can't remember if it's 5 or 6 of those mini showcases. So you'll be able to see between 3 to 5 producers at each of those events. We're wrapping the season with the Judgment of Richmond, which is still kind of in development right now. We're working on it, but that will take place at the Museum of History and Culture, and there's going to be a wine competition component, and there's going to be a public consumer facing component, and then our artists for the Norton Wine Tour poster will be there as well.
And you'll get to essentially what we're still kind of in the planning process, but we're going to try to taste Missouri wines against Virginia wines.
That is the
Norton
intention.
wines.
That is the intention. We got some legal stuff we got to jump through to make that happen.
But we're gonna call out Missouri, and it's all in good fun. Mostly, we're better than Missouri.
We're using it to market. We've gotten into our backyard, and Jenny's mission is to see world renowned. So we got to go from our backyard, and we got to start moving out of Virginia. And so now we're kind of tagging Missouri.
A friendly competition,
Yeah.
that's always fun. So we're gonna challenge Stonehill, and we're gonna challenge, we're gonna let consumers come in and see what's going on, see that judging process happen, and then you're gonna get to taste other Norton wines there. The museum is sponsoring this. They're helping us with this.
Yeah. Shout out to Virginia Museum of History and Culture in Richmond. They're awesome.
And Jeremiah Strunk for helping
And
us
Jeremiah Strunk.
get that
Yeah.
connection.
What an appropriate organization to support.
They were looking to beef out a lot of their documentation on things in the Virginia wine industry. And this was an opportunity to create a historical event at their Virginia Wine Festival.
They very well may have historical documentation that we haven't uncovered, possibly.
We should talk to them.
We should talk to them.
But what I was building to was that you started this mission 26, 27 years ago of doing Norton, and through a joke and some laughter, Jill and I have taken it to this level of like how do we promote it in our backyard to now how do we promote it nationally? Mm-hmm. And what's crazy to us, and which I think tells Jill and I and you, I'm sure, that we're doing the right thing by drawing awareness to Norton, is the amount of people that come out of the woodworks to support this.
Oh my gosh, new producers, old producers,
organizations,
counties. Yeah, and even people who are Norton supporters who aren't they're not directly in the industry with us. They might be. We had a real estate agent for a winery, and she was also in marketing as well, who wanted to be a part of the Norton network. And I think that's so great about the space we've created. It's collaborative, and it allows for everyone to be involved, which gives us a diversity that most other wine organizations don't have.
The Virginia Wine Marketing Board, who Most people think they're very focused on promoting just the vinifera and the meritage, blah, blah, blah.
They have been nothing but supportive.
Nothing but all about helping Chrysalis and the Norton Network. And then we've started reaching out to Missouri. They jumped on the opportunity immediately. They think it's cool. They want to see how they can do that in their state. But I'm also I'm getting phone calls and emails from people in other states going, how do I get some Norton vines? Can you ship wine here? When is your event? Maybe I can time my trip to Virginia. Yeah, that's been going on.
I didn't realize that.
Jenny and I have been working with Brett Causey out in Arkansas, who's growing Norton, and he fell in love with Norton because he used to drive Norton motorcycles. And it's just this is the coolest thing about Norton, is that name, which I don't think is a very marketable name for a grape. I've said this many times, but people are attracted to something.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. But they're attracted to the grape, the mission that you've created for Chrysalis
just
Vineyards.
thank God that it's not Gewürztraminer.
Gewürztraminer. Yeah.
I just call that the gangster wine because it's delicious.
So,
by the way, it was 30 years ago, this past January, that Alan and I went to Spain.
Well, there you go.
So I started this
30 years ago.
Almost 31 years ago.
And so in 30 years, I know that we all want everybody to be drinking Norton wine. I think that's the most important message to take away. Come June 7th, learn about Norton wine, drink more Norton wine.
Come see Jenny.
Meet Jenny McLeod. Read the book, The Wild Vine. I mean, there's all kinds of things they can do, but people have been slowly supporting Norton, and they're interested in Norton all across the country.
And it's not a wine that's the only thing you want in your cellar,
Sure.
but it should be in everybody's cellar.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
There should be some
staple.
Norton. I mean, do you really want to drink Cabernet Sauvignon forever until your end of your days? No. Variety is the spice of life. It's a very interesting grape with an incredibly interesting history, with incredible characteristics that make it unique and different. I remember Governor's vision for the future. I was on the wine board years ago, and in the mid-aughts, there was a 2015 vision for the winery. And I'll never forget that the tagline, or the base understanding, the base mission, was to promote the quality and uniqueness of Virginia wines. Man, there ain't nothing more unique than this stuff, Norton.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's it's our day job, but I think I enjoy talking to you about Norton. I think there are a lot of people in the industry right now who knew a lot about Norton are starting to retire, phase out, and so we're losing that connection. And nobody is more passionate about Norton than Jennifer McLeod at Chrysalis Vineyards.
Very true.
But I'd like to give you a run for your money. I think Jill does every day too. You know, we have made it our mission to promote Norton, even as an aside from Chrysalis Vineyards, because it is something that I enjoy very much. It's a terrific wine. I've got other winemakers
And
that
happy
hate
to
it,
pass the baton.
but we're seeing this, and I guess what I'm going to end the episode with, because Jill's giving me the blinky eyes.
The circle finger.
Is thank you, Jennifer McLeod, for creating this mission and keeping that history going, because it's employed Jill and I both, but it's also something we've fallen in love with and become passionate about. So we do appreciate that.
You both are very welcome, and it's my pleasure and honor to work with you in this mission.
All right. Well, I'm Jake Blottinger.
And I'm Jill Smedley.
And we're here with Jennifer McLeod. Thank you so much.
And this is Wine Fringe. Talk to you guys next time.